it's just and the ring, right? Like this is where Lego has gotten really good with building sets that are swooshable. And I think you highlighted this too with the 20th anniversary of Slave One
Mm-hmm.
that came out, and you were like, "This is really cool how you can hold it and swoosh it." And some of the new gunships have been doing that really well.
Yeah.
The new AE has done that really well. So having that way to like hold the hyperdrive ring and move it around is where I think Lego really like it always Lego does a great job of like building on your imagination and making suggestions of things and like allowing kind of creating the conditions that are optimal for you to kind of immerse yourself in play. This is just taking that one step forward and really putting you there.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We are your co-host. I'm Grinch.
And I'm Wes.
And today we're going to continue our Lego Star Wars conversation and dive into the world of Star Wars Episode 2, also known as the second best Star Wars movie ever released. That sarcasm. But we have a good topic coming up. But before we get into that kind of topic discussion, West, I believe you have an announcement.
Not so much an announcement as it is just a general PSA, but I had a chance on Monday at work to see the eclipse. It was really, really cool. For any of the listeners who got a chance to see it, I hope you guys enjoyed it. For the listeners who didn't get a chance to see it, it was definitely exciting. And I hope at the next opportunity you are able to do so, because it's definitely worth the time and energy to make that happen. So,
for all the listeners in the UK and Ireland and the rest of the world, we had an eclipse in the US, so that was cool. But also not really relevant.
To where you are?
Huh? Yeah, we were like 30 minutes actually outside of like the direct total blackout.
Nice
path, but we didn't drive down because I was working all day, and so was my wife. So being an adult sucks. Being an adult sucks. That's the PSA today, folks. Being an adult sucks. But that's why we have Lego, right? So West, why don't we move over to our next segment and get into some exciting Lego news? Exciting Lego news.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got very excited about this news, and then more information came out, and this is why I don't necessarily like to personally talk about leaks too much. But the Mona Lisa set, it was rumored it was going to have chrome gold frame around the entire set, which would be a huge deal, because as we kind of talked about last week or a couple weeks ago, Star Wars Episode 1, they don't really chrome stuff anymore. So having chrome gold in the palette again would be really, really cool. But it's now kind of clarified it might be drum lacquered gold or pearl gold, but we will, I guess, not know until the set's officially revealed.
Yeah, I think the drum lacquered is definitely the future for some of those Lego metallic colors, and I'm not too disappointed by that. I think it looks just fine. So if that's what they end up sticking with for something like this, I think that it would still probably look just as great. For the listeners, for those of you who are old enough to remember and young enough not to remember, the chrome pieces chipped away. And so you would have a lot of issues. It was painted on after the fact. And so like your lightsabers were like this weird sort of semi-translucent gray color, just like very raw plastic with the chrome on them. And they looked fine, but like right around where the hand clips onto it, it would wear away after some time. And then I think some of the rarer chrome minifigures, like the Stormtrooper C-3PO, there was actually a part on the body. And this was kind of strange. I never really understood why they did this, where like the arm blocked part of the
It's because when they sprayed it on, they would spray on the chrome. I don't know why they didn't just put the arms back. I don't know if they just can't. Yeah. I don't know if they can't move the arms, but like
all the way up.
yeah, like I don't know, maybe it slows down production, costs money. This is a
I,
business after all.
I think the point is like it was neat. They tried it from a production quality standpoint. Drum lacquer seems to look pretty good and seems to be something that they're able to do a lot easier. So it still
Uh,
seems like it could be a little expensive in terms of production, but yeah, I don't know. I'm all for it. I also don't
don't
mind the pearl
don't tell
colors.
that to the companies that make toilet fixtures and racks for towels, because brushed sterling is not the same as chrome. And I've been, as somebody who just bought a house that needs new fixtures, all the internet blogs would be ablaze by you saying that those are comparable. I'm just saying.
Well, with respect to Lego.
I'm just trolling you, man. We're just having a good time. No, I think I would love to see them try Chrome again. I don't like the whole excuse of like, well, we tried it and we failed, so sorry. You don't get any. I think I think it is a totally different finish altogether to have Chrome versus the brushed sort of lacquered color, the gold lacquered or the silver metallic
Yeah.
lacquered. But
Yeah.
I'm happy that exists. I think both should exist. I think they're, instead of filling the niche of Chrome, we should have both.
What I'm curious to see where, like I feel like the application itself would be so rare in terms of like usage that I would be interested to see like where that would make a huge difference. You know what I mean?
Riddle me this. In real life, do you see chromed items more often or transparent, vibrant colored things? Like a trans green or a trans blue or trans orange or purple.
No, I hear you. But I also don't see a ton of Chrome stuff other than like,
What about a car? What, what,
well,
what if
car.
you had speed champions with like chrome accents on them?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for the older stuff, right? Most modern cars don't maintain like a lot of Chrome,
Sure,
so
sure.
I don't know. I, from a business perspective, juice and squeeze, not sure it's there. But let's keep pressing with our news. You had another exciting piece here.
Yeah, we had a bunch of Star Wars reveals. We had like the Droideka reveal. We had the Commander Cody Brickhead reveal. We
Yeah,
had the official reveal of the Mos Espa pod race that had been kind of leaked. I was a little disappointed with this one. I like the set, but it's just Anakin and Sebulba like pod racing through the cliffs. I was
yeah,
personally hoping that there would actually be more of like the stadium where the pod race begins kind of built out, and then maybe that curve. I don't know why when I saw the name, that's what I had in mind. Um, this just seems a little boring to me, but
up rank.
still cool. I'm gonna get all the 25th year of Lego Star Wars sets because I don't really collect Star Wars, so I just make some exceptions, and this is the exception I'm making. But what are your thoughts on these?
You know, I like. I think pod racers in smaller form look better.
Sure.
You're able to connect the cockpit to the engines without having to use translucent pieces, right? And they're light enough that it just sort of holds it in really well. I think Sebulba's pod racer. I've always liked the look of this thing, right? It has these giant engines. They look really like slick. So and the colors are fantastic for it, right? That sort of Sherbety orange color. I don't think that's regular orange, is it? Or is it regular orange? It might be
No,
regular
that's
orange.
regular orange. Yeah.
Um, but that in black is just like a really kind of great color. And then when you go over to Anakin's and with the yellow and gray and blues, like it definitely stands out as like a different vehicle. Um, I I think it looks great. This is where I think pod racers really kind of shine and scale. Um, but I think we've talked about these diorama sets a little bit. The dioramas are great. I love that Lego's continuing to build stuff for adult collectors.
I know I might have to go back and get all the other Star Wars dioramas before they go up in price.
The one that I think I really want to get is the Endor one.
Mm-hmm.
Because it had such a great speeder bike build, and then to get Luke and Leia in that Endor costume, I think looks really great. But and I like the tree builds too in that one. How they do like kind of the
big redwoods.
Woods, yeah, exactly. I just, you see the lifestyle photo of it, and it's like put onto a bookshelf, and so like I could imagine somebody who collects all of these dioramas, and it's just like, what do you do with them? You know what I mean? Like, they're dust collectors at the end of the day, and if like one of the scenes or one of the movies really speaks to you, like I totally get that, but I don't know, collecting them in bulk is just not something I'm super interested in. The brick sculpting in it looks wonderful for the arch that they fly under. Going back to the Mos Espa discussion, like I think there's some really great techniques there. But I could look at the Lego instructions online to see how they did that. I don't need to buy the set to do that necessarily. So I don't know. I think they're very exciting, but this is probably one that I'm going to pass on in terms of pushing out or buying. I've bought the 20th anniversary collection. It surprised me. It felt like that was just last year. That was the first year I moved into the house, actually, and now we're about ready to sell. So it's it's like coming full circle. But I'm like, man, I got to go shell out like more money for more anniversary sets. Like, and it kind of is the same way with the minifigures. You and I have talked about, like, because I'm a Rogue One completionist collector, I will probably get the Saw Gerrera figure through the Sith Infiltrator set, but I don't know if I need the rest of them just to have them. So I don't know.
I'm just, you're allowed to collect how you want to collect.
Absolutely, I'm lukewarm on that one, but it was nice to see those sets revealed. The Droideka looks great.
Droideka looks sweet.
Yeah, the brickheads. This was the case too with the brickheads that were created, I think, in response to episode 7. And you got those for me.
It's episode 8.
Okay, so it was episode 8. There was like the Finn and Captain Phasma ones. And like once you build one trooper, like you've kind of built them all. And you mentioned sort of the repetitive nature of the brickheads. And
yeah, I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago in the What We're Rebuilding section, where I was like, I got to space out my brickheads because it's like, yes, I've already built this before. I've already built, and it's like you build the same base, you build the same internal structure, and then you just add different colored bricks on the outside.
Right. And like the techniques are still fun. And one of the brickhead sets that I really liked was actually the buildable build your own brickhead set. I think both of us have that one.
Mm-hmm.
And we both made ourselves and our significant others in brickhead form, which I think was kind of fun. So I there's certainly some goodness there in brickheads, but I don't know if I don't know. Anyways, moving on.
Lego Dreams. We also had Dreams sets revealed. I'm not like a super fan of Dreams. It's kind of cool to like look at the set pictures and like get a they're definitely different, but they just don't really speak to me. Some of the the builds are cool because I think they've done a really good job of making them like not just a traditional build in the sense of like the one I'm looking at right now is the Never Witch's Nightmare Raven. And there's a house on the back of this giant flying raven, and it's got these kind of like raven wing pieces coming off of it, which are good. But then the house has got this curved design, so like they didn't just put like a square house on the back of it. They made it kind of this kind of curvy, house that's kind of being. So that's interesting to me. The chimney is all curved. It looks kind of like something out of like the Nightmare Before Christmas sort of thing, but I still don't want this set. I just think it looks interesting.
Dreams has been interesting because it's Lego's newest homegrown theme, right? Their newest internal theme, and so in our last week's episode for the listener, we talked about the success and failure of Hidden Side.
We talked about the failure, not the success per se.
I will still go down saying that I think there were some successes. I will acknowledge there was a lot of misses, but I think there were some hits.
If you take your standards and just lower them a little bit, you'll really like it.
That's not fair.
That's the only fair way to judge it.
But I think it's interesting to see a series like Dreams where I'm like, who is this for? Whereas like Hidden Side felt like more high schooly, teenager, young adult. Like Dreams just, I don't know. It's interesting, but the theme is maturing and their sets are maturing and they're going in interesting directions, right? The Raven looks really cool. They're going back to some mech builds. That seems to be like Lego's secret safe zone of like, we'll make a mech.
I don't know if it's a secret. I'm looking at this like, oh my gosh, another IP with a freaking mech.
Fair.
I'm like, lay off the mechs. Who buys all these mechs? I mean, they're kind of cool, I guess. I'm just not a mech person. I like Pacific Rim. That was a cool movie. But like we don't need like a mech for everything. I mean, now the mechs are in Star Wars too. It's like a way to get the minifigures out. Like the microfighters were like serviceable, but the mechs are just dumb.
The microfighters made good parts collections, right? Like, well, I will probably buy the what is it? Which Captain Rex's Y-wing or whatever.
The Y-wing.
Yeah. Anyways, neither here nor there. The Raven looks cool. I think there's a dinosaur in the other one, right? There's like a T-Rex. Like they definitely look cool. The Raven, if you take the house off of it, would probably be a great little addition to the World of Warcraft set. Like some dark. I don't think
Dungeons. You mean Dungeons and Dragons?
That one.
Major like minus 20K viewers just there.
I almost said the same thing, but I feel like I'd be really alienating our fans. I recognize they're two separate IPs with two extremely passionate fan bases. The Dungeons and Dragons set, I don't know if there's a like Raven character in Dungeons and Dragons, but if you're talking about fantasy, make one up. This thing looks like it would be a great addition for that. So it's definitely kind of cool. There's some really neat pieces, some recolors in the Dreams line, but other than that, it doesn't really speak to me. Have you bought one?
I've never bought Dreams. I don't really plan on it.
Yeah, I don't.
There's just so much other stuff I want. Like, there's just so much Lego now that it's like, I like seldom do I go to the store anymore. And I'm just like, I just want to build a Lego set because I've got 50 at home I need to build. So it's just, yeah, that would be the. What?
More Lego means there's something for everybody, which
I never said it was a bad thing. I just said I'm not buying Dreams.
No, I hear you. I'm just saying that I think in the grand scheme of things, the fact that there's something there for everybody is really cool. So
Lego. As somebody that collects too, the more people that are into the hobby, like the more value your collection retains because more people are going to want all the old Lord of the Rings sets when they come out with a couple of new ones here and there.
You mean my baseball card collection is, not the same?
Actually, trading cards have like gone up quite a bit in collectability.
I was just kidding. I don't actually have a baseball card collection.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about that. I'm going to save West from himself here and move on to the main topic. Today's topic. So today we're talking all about Star Wars Episode 2. This is the initial wave for the movie that came out was in 2002/2003, back when there was the yellow faces. This was still kind of pre that transition, which is interesting because we'll talk about it later. But some of these sets are quite collectible, despite having those yellow faces, which with Star Wars Episode 4 we don't necessarily see. There was a repeat wave in 2013. But really, since then, it's really just been one-offs. We've had one UCS set from this movie, which is quite small, quite a low number. And then on top of that, up until the new saga that came out, Star Wars Episode 2 was traditionally the movie from the original sagas or the sagas of Star Wars, not counting Solo, Rogue One, etc. But Star Wars Episode 2 was the movie that had the least number of Lego sets made. In fact, it is still down there. Last Jedi and Force Awakens have more. Rise of Skywalker is the only movie that has less. So that's kind of where we're at with Star Wars Episode 2, which is kind of a shame. But West, I don't know why you think that is. I mean, obviously the movie wasn't great. Some people even say, or I don't know, maybe the majority of people would say it's worse than The Phantom Menace. I know I've heard both arguments where it was just The Phantom Menace was bad and this was worse. But what are your thoughts on that, on why there's so few sets?
Well, I think, first I was looking at the data you pulled for the series and kind of thinking about the series itself as we were preparing for the episode. And I think we're running into the same problem as we ran into, and I say we, the larger community or Lego too, that we ran into with episode 1, right? Which is, if you look at the narrative story of episode 2 and everything that's featured in the movie, the amount of vehicle options and set to build just aren't quite there. I would submit to you, though, that much like episode 1 and your comments on episode 1, episode 2 could really use from some smaller playset sized environmental builds rather than ships. But if you look at the series, it's largely focused on ships. And so what do we see? We see, Obi-Wan Kenobi's Jedi Starfighter featured multiple times. We see droids from Geonosis in various forms featured multiple times. We see, those are really the ones that have been repeated. You have the ATTEs that have been repeated now a couple of times. And so there's certainly some, I think, goodness here, but I also think there's just sort of a lack of material to build off of and to get sort of creative with. So I don't know. I mean, certainly could we get a new Sam Wessel and the Bounty Hunter suit, like a more modern version of that? Yeah, I think that would look really great.
I mean, Jango Fett Slave 1 would be another, just instant, take my money Lego, and they could just put Sam Wessel in that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of options here for Lego if they were trying to maybe update some of the stuff that they've already created. But there's also a lot of options, too, for them to expand. So I think as for the movie, right, I think after episode 1 with Jar Jar Binks and the backlash, the larger Star Wars community approached episode 2 very hesitantly. And I think episode 2 also just really struggled with some of the narrative points in the movie and sort of staying cohesive, right? Not to get it overly into critiquing the movie itself, because that's a separate podcast and a whole separate discussion. But George Lucas does a lot of telling you things and not showing you things. And I also felt like in the movie itself, he's trying to show a love story develop in a short period of time and make it convincing, and also show this, peaceful galaxy at the edge of war, and all of these different things happening at the same time. And it never just really comes together, narratively speaking, in a way that feels cohesive and compelling. And so you're just sort of on a ride of this is what George is telling me, but I'm not always convinced that the story he's telling is doing the lifting that he thinks it's doing. So I don't know. I guess all of that sort of contributes to a lukewarm reception to the movie. I suppose we could have looked at box office numbers to see how much they dropped off between the first and the second movie. But I would imagine Lego probably decided to play it safe between that and the fact that there's sort of a lack of subject material with this theme. And then, just like episode 1, they've been revisiting it slowly over the years with sort of greatest hits, but never investing too much in building out another or revamped wave of the Clone Wars, or sorry, Attack of the Clones. So
I think
I don't
too,
know
like
all those points.
the the existence of Star Wars Clone Wars, the show, really
Yeah,
affects this movie and episode 3, and honestly probably even episode 1 a little bit, in terms of like if there's a recurring character, it's like, well, let's get the Clone Wars one done, let's focus on Clone Wars versus episode 1. And I think, in that case, you do see a lot of sets that could have existed in this realm that are branded as a Clone Wars set, because it's
yeah,
based off of, chronologically something that happened like, a year after this movie, right? And so there's just such a big source material to pull from. And with
yeah.
this not being, super iconic of a movie, I do think there's plenty of stuff that they could still build. I don't remember all the names of every single Star Wars ship. I apologize in advance. But there's the scene of the big Geonosis circular ships going up to the Trade Federation, like the little control center ones, escaping Geonosis.
Looser hulks, but they're also just the droid control ships.
Yeah. But then there's the clone ones that are shooting it.
Oh, yep, the tanks.
Yeah, they've made that in like micro form, kind of.
Yeah.
And like they made the commands, but like they haven't made that. And I do think there's still a lot that they could do here, but they just haven't.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I wanted to comment too on the Clone Wars piece, right? Because when you prepared the list of all the sets that are, according to Brickset, officially attributed to Star Wars Episode 2, I was like, well, where's the newest ATT? And then I think you and I both were sort of chatting before we started the episode, and you were like, well, that's technically attributed to the Clone Wars. And I was like, oh. So I think there's a lot of sets in here that people would be like, isn't that an Attack of the Clones set? And you're like, no, that's technically a Clone Wars set. And so I think it does, like you said, I think the Clone Wars itself as a genre, or not even genre, but like maybe sub-theme within Lego Star Wars, pulls a lot of attention and weight towards itself, in comparison with the other prequel movies. So,
or they're just kind of like, this is from episode, you can tell by the clones usually, and that's where it just kind of falls into like, is it early Clone Wars or later Clone Wars?
Yeah, which I do like and appreciate now. Their design for the clones is consistent across Clone Wars and non-Clone Wars sets. If you look at the blister pack in this series, they still have like the curvy chest plates, kind of, that we may attribute more towards the Clone Wars, versus sort of these more square chest plates that from the original Attack of the Clones line that really differentiated them, right? So
I think they've gone away from that more recently, though, right?
The curvy ones?
Yeah, with the newer stuff.
No, I think they're all still, like, the centerpiece is still like curves towards the center, like below their breastplates, like around their abdomen area. So, which I think you pointed out is actually technically more accurate with the movies. So
if I did point it out, I'll take the credit, but I did not. But I'll take the credit. Well,
I'm gonna give you the credit.
Haha.
What I like,
such a genius.
Because the failure of the Clone Wars Lego set series was when they tried to emulate the animation style for the faces, which will go down in history as some of the worst Lego faces. It's probably that and like the second wave of Harry Potter faces that were just like really out to lunch. Like in the Clone Wars ones, they were like big eyes, really goofy features, right? So it's nice that it's all consistent. But let's kind of get back to episode 2. Grinch, what are your thoughts on that initial wave that came out from 02 to 03?
I actually think the initial wave was darn near perfect. I mean, there were some issues with some of them. Like, I had the ATTE growing up, and I just remember we would play with it, and like a leg would always fall off here and there. I'm sure they've constructed it better nowadays, but in terms of like assortment, You've got some good representation of Geonosis here, right? Obviously, that's probably the main focus of these is Geonosis. You got the Geonosis fighter set with those sand red droids, which are like the battle droids, which are super cool. Hailfire droid, ATTE, the Jedi Duel, and then you get kind of into then Republic gunship, of course, but then you get into like the more just expanded episode 2 sets with Bounty Hunter, Tusken Raider Encounter, Jedi Starfighter. Jedi Starfighter is definitely the Luke's land speeder of this episode in terms of like just the number of times it's popped up. I mean, it's like 2002, then 2013, and then we got a UCS one, and then 2017, and then one of the most, one of the latest episode 2 sets that we've got was a Jedi Starfighter, of course. So it's just it's the Sith infiltrator, it's the Luke land speeder of this episode.
Yeah. I think there's some real notable standouts here, right? So you mentioned the sand red battle droids, which are exclusive to the Geonosis series and this location. The other things that stand out are the super battle droids. This was the first time we got super battle droids in LEGO.
And the original ones from the gunship were the metallic blue.
Yeah.
Which is not what they are now.
Yeah, because now they're like the
dark, kind of metallic gray. But these were pearl sand blue, technically, was the color.
They look really great. Cool.
And they're super rare because the original Super Battle Droid design, which we got here, and then again a few years later in the Battle Pack, the arms broke all the time. I mean, just sitting there, they would just break. Not even using the darn things, they would break just from they were just built under stress, like they were under stress being in the socket. So these like it's really rare to find one totally completed nowadays. If you ever see one that's new and it's like discounted, it's probably because it's got a crack in the arm.
Yeah, and it's the old battle droids too. Like I'm sure we have a collection of cracked battle droid arms for the same reason. And certainly, as we mentioned in the episode 1 series, right? Like that figure hasn't really changed. They've made different variations of super battle droids, and I would imagine they've probably strengthened those arms a little bit. But it's also, relatively speaking, remained fairly consistent. The one thing I wanted to point out in the Republic gunship, which is the infamous figure, Jedi Bob, which is everybody's favorite. I think we're still rumored to maybe get a Jedi Bob this year. Is that correct?
That's the rumor I've seen.
Yeah. And then we had other sets too, like Slave One, right, in the dark blue Jango Fett colors, which was wonderful. I believe there was a Slave One in the sand in the Boba Fett series or coloration. That was more or less an identical set to this one, but this one just had the cool thing with it, right, is like you literally just swap some pieces. There's been some people who've taken the UCS Slave One and turned it into the Jango Fett one with some colors. It's not overly complicated. It's just a really cool looking fighter. It's fun to see it in a different color. So
yeah, the Boba Fett Slave one, like the first one ever Lego created, came out 2 years before this, and this is a notable upgrade to that set. Like a notable upgrade.
Very rectangular cockpit and just looked very blocky and almost silly, kind of like the one from the Mandalorian, like the small little playset one the Mandalorian had a few years ago. That just you were like, I see what you're doing here, Lego. Or the one from the Cloud City UCS set that was just like really tiny, and you're just like, guys, what's going on?
Yeah, it was a pretty good design, though. I'm not gonna lie, because I have that. I do think it's funny that this Slave One is closer to the original remake that they made of the original trilogy Slave One than it is to the original Slave One set that they made just a few years before this. It's closer to one that was made, twice the amount of time later in Lego history, to just kind of show you the upgrade here. But you did talk about Jedi Bob, the thing that stood out to me with episode 2, when kind of like looking through all the sets, was the minifigures. There are I mean, there's no like absolute, just like, it's not like a top 6 minifigure, in terms of price for Lego Star Wars, right? I mean, you're thinking of, Cloud City Boba Fett up there, right, as like the chase minifigure. But when you're looking through the minifigures here, there's some pretty heavy hitters. I mean, there's Zam Wessel, right, who is only time she ever appeared in a set, she's darn near $100 now. You've got Jedi Bob, who's been over $100 for a long time, and he's just literally called Jedi Bob. It's just called Jedi Knight, and he's not an attributed character. And then you have Jango. You have all 3 versions of Jango Fett here, and that original version of Jango Fett is a $300+ minifigure. All the other Jango Fetts are also like 200 something plus. I mean, there's just a lot of heavy hitters. Even the battle droids, those sand red battle droids, are like $30 for a battle droid, and the sand or blue super battle droids are like $100 for them. So as far as like the minifigure kind of collectability and selection goes with this, it's a pretty heavy hitter, especially considering there's so few sets. But even like Count Dooku, because episode 2 version of Count Dooku is the only non-Clone Wars or Clone Wars of 5 version that we got with this curved, we talked about it earlier, chrome lightsaber hilt, which has now gone up substantially. The minifigures are just kind of really cool, in my opinion.
Yeah. This was also one of the, this was our first issue of Clone Troopers. So you got it in the ATTE set and then the Republic Gunship set, both of them, which were really cool. Grinchy is the ATTE one. I did want to note that this is still the era of using the megaphone piece as a blaster, which I think is just
nostalgia.
Peak Lego there of just kind of fun.
And this is when they gave him the trans blue piece to go in front, because
instead of
up to this point, I think the droids were orange, and I was gonna say the Empire was red, but no, they were also orange. They had only done orange blaster pieces.
They did orange and red because I think there were some.
Were they red? I thought they were, but I think now that I think about it, I think they're orange too. But the original battle droids from episode 1, they used orange cones, and they quickly went away from that to just using the stud, because the cone does look a little stupid.
I mean, it's all a little silly, but it is what it is.
You mean like you can't take it serious if like people are running around with backwards megaphones? I don't know. For me, there's something you remember we used to take like 2 or 3 megaphones, and then you'd put like a cylinder and a cone on it, and you'd make like a rocket launcher pack, and we I mean, we got pretty creative with these things.
So there was definitely a lot of like creativity going into making those megaphones into like bigger weapons. This was also the first series that we got the helmets, with the cuts in them. We had that for Jango Fett, that kind of followed the Boba Fett design of the original Boba Fett design. And then the Clone Troopers also have the cut in it for the black head underneath, which I totally understand. I'm so happy Lego's gone away from that. I look back at those minifigures, and other than their nostalgia, I'm like, okay, I'm so glad this is done. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on any of that?
The slit heads, yeah, I just remember the Jango Fett. It's funny because he's such a chase minifigure, but he looks so bad because they put like a face on him, and so you can like see it through his slit mask, and you're just like, okay. And I don't know, it just looks silly to me. But I do love, this was still pretty early days of Star Wars in this initial wave, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about they've been doing this thing for 3 years at this point when episode 2 came out, because they started with episode 1. And I just felt like we got a lot of aliens here. When you think about that initial kind of wave of Star Wars, we made fun of the Sebulba, we made fun of the, Adar Beto minifigures that they kind of built, right? Or that they had like this one piece. But here you got really good Geonosian soldiers, like with the wings that looked. I mean, they look. Do they stand up to today's time? Honestly, they're pretty close. You put a little printing on their head, and they're there in my mind. One of the first appearances of Yoda we had, I think one or two maybe before that. But then we also had Tusken Raiders. So I think like the Star Wars universe was starting to diversify a little bit in terms of the alien diversification as well. And we started to get kind of some more different minifigures and not just your typical, like they were starting to branch out here. And I think you'd kind of see that echo, throughout time. And then, later in later years, we got a lot of really cool minifigures here with some of the Clone Wars stuff, like the what is it, Colin? What's his name? Colin Trevorrow or something like Coleman. Sorry, Trevor. That's a kind of great minifigure himself. That's that Jedi that gets shot by Jango Fett. He's kind of like the dinosaur looking one. Yeah.
I was like Colin Trevorrow.
Colin Trevorrow, yeah, he's actually in this. No, it's Coleman. I always forget his name. Coleman Trevorrow.
Jurassic Park series.
I feel like that character's name is just wrong. Like it's like they might as well have called him Jedi Bob George Lucas, because like it's just like Coleman Trevorrow is like he's like this dinosaur alien. I just would have thought his name would have been like Shakti or something like just something a little bit more foreign than just Coleman. It's like when
it's my name's Coleman.
Yeah, it's like when you have you have a cat named Fred, right? And you're just like, hey, Fred. And then like more recently too, with the newest Obi-Wan's starfighter, we got the Tanwi, right? The Kaminoan with the long neck, which will super unique minifigure. So like there's a lot to love here actually. And I don't know about you, but for me, I always think about dark red, because dark red was a brand new color at this point in LEGO's history. I believe it started in 2021, and a lot of these sets were 2022, but it was the kind of accent color on a lot of these sets, with the Republic gunship, with that ATTE, with the cockpit, and then a little speeder bike, the Anakin speeder bike. There's a lot of color here. Between from the dark red to the dark blue of Jango Fett's ship, and then you got the bounty hunter chase. So I don't know, I always really kind of liked this wave of Lego.
That's an interesting color design and color theory. Is something that is certainly extremely important to Lego, but is also important narratively speaking. And this is a quick tangent on color, but somebody went through all of the Breaking Bad episodes and like highlighted the colors that were like prominent in those episodes. And then tried to like connect it to the general tone and direction of each episode. And so I'm curious to see or hear, maybe some thoughts from our listeners or you on the use of these colors, right? White and dark red for the Republic. There's a lot of earth tones, browns and tans and sand reds for the Geonosians, burnt oranges, right? Mm-hmm. So this is very much like a great series itself, right? Of like the Clone Troopers. This was the original issue of the Clone Troopers. So this is pre-episode 3 and the Clone Wars. So like all of the Clone Troopers are wearing white. And then like the battle droids from episode 1, their rank is denoted by color. And so you see different colors of Clone Troopers associated with different rank, but they're still predominantly wearing white, which when you think about like, the purpose of like camouflage or concealment, like why would you go to a planet that's like dusty red when you're wearing white? Like,
well, I think you can start that conversation with stormtroopers in general.
Right. These are supposed to be
chronologically. This is before that.
Exactly.
Right.
And certainly this is part of the narrative, right? Of like, if you think like some of the, we're going to get a little nerdy here, of like Tarkin doctrine of like, we're going to show up and just wreck everything as the Empire, and you're just going to fall in line, right? It doesn't matter what color people are wearing, because you actually want them to be seen, because their presence sends a message. And so with clones, right, something like white, it's mass producible. You don't have to change it depending on which environment you're going to. It's just consistent. So like, these are all sorts of things that I'm sure they've sort of thought through as they were kind of thinking about set design and stuff like that. But it's just fascinating to see again sort of this play out then in the themes, and then in Lego form, we're getting a lot of whites and dark reds. You're right. This was one of the biggest issuances of dark red, I think, with Lego up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of it in here. If you look at the original wave 2, this is probably one of the last waves that we're going to see gray and dark gray before they switch into the light bluish gray and dark bluish gray.
Yep.
I think you look at some of the original sets, you can still see some of that peeking through, which is interesting because around 2002 2003, light bluish gray does start appearing in Lego. And so this is just kind of chronologically with respect to Lego's own timeline, like this interesting period. It wasn't like a clean break where like on 1 month Lego was like light bluish gray is now a thing, right? And
It just kind of started trickling in.
Yeah, for example, your Burlington Northern Santa Fe train set, and we talked about this on our train episodes, had light bluish gray pieces in it. But it came out around the same time as these sets did themselves. So definitely an interesting kind of viewpoint here. So for even just chronologically as like a representation of Lego history, it's interesting to see these sets and sort of what they represented. These were also the last Star Wars movie sets made in conjunction with a Star Wars movies to feature the yellow face. Because all of the episode 3 sets went into flesh tone faces.
Yep.
And I know you mentioned the original wave of yellow faces, right? So, and certainly makes that a little more nostalgic, and also, again, this transitional series that makes it really rare. So kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think too, like as we're kind of talking about all the sets, this is a perfect example of like how big Lego Star Wars has become, because there's just, when we look at sets for these things, we look at the brick set, we look at Brick Economy as like database sources, Brickopedia, and we try to stay consistent with the source that we use so our conversation can be consistent. But there's stuff that aren't on here, or like the planet side, the planets where like they had a Camino. Well, it's like, do you classify that as an episode 2 set, or is it a just planet series set where they had the little ball planets? Brick set says it's not an episode 2 set, but that's where it could be. Or the ATTE that came out this past year, like you mentioned, is that an episode 2 set or not? Right? It's the Clone Wars set. So as people are listening, if we're not talking about a certain set, it might be because it's not necessarily databased here as well. Just wanted to throw that out there.
So this was the initial wave. Then they go and do a repeat wave. So was there anything that stood out for you, Grinch, in the repeat wave, specifically in terms of how they revisited it? I always think it's interesting to see what sets they decide to redo and what sets they decide to leave off. And I'm curious how much we think that that's an indicator of set performance or sales performance. What do you think as kind of the business specialist here? Certainly there's some new stuff, right? And I'll let you kind of talk through that in a second. But like, do you think that if they've decided to repeat it, that's probably a pretty good indication that Lego knows that's going to sell well?
I wanted to say one thing before that.
Okay.
Going back to the original wave, because this was like my peak of Star Wars Lego, was the early stuff of Star Wars. As an adult, I don't really collect it as much as like this is what we got as kids was Star Wars. And there was somebody who posted on Reddit, I don't understand the point of battle packs. Why do they even exist? They seem pointless and stupid to me. If you want to understand why they exist, just for the love of God, go back and look at this original wave. If you wanted battle droids from episode 2, how many sets are they available in West?
Very few.
1.
Yeah.
Back in 2003, right? Since we've had battle packs since then, but it's like you would have to buy, if you wanted 20 battle droids, you would literally have to buy 10 Geonosian starfighter sets. So then you also have 10 Geonosian starfighters. If you wanted clones, you had to either buy the ATTE And yeah, sure, you got I think 4 of them in that set, or
Sure.
the Republic gunship, and then again you got like 3 in that set.
Was it? I mean, the gunship cost $90
Yeah,
coming out, and
yeah,
the TE cost
I think 70.
$70.
Because I
Like
had to mow lawns to earn that. I know exactly how much that cost. Every lawnmower, I was like $5 closer. It was great.
they were expensive sets,
They
and
were.
so yeah, to your point. I mean, I know that's how I felt, right? Like I wanted to build an army,
Hmm.
and so um,
So yeah, if you're ever wondering why battle packs are a thing, just go and look at the original sets because
yeah,
it's hard to mass an army on here. Um, Certainly just plain battle droids too, right? Like there's one set that had battle droids in it, just one.
yeah, absolutely.
So sorry, I just wanted to get that out. Going back to your question
Oh,
here, because the first thing I noticed is that now all of a sudden there's one, two, three, four, 5 sets that came out that have a clone in them, right? There's super battle droids in 3 of the sets that came out in this 2013 wave. There's the sand red battle droids that came out in 2, or sorry, the dark orange battle droids that came out in 2 sets in this wave. So maybe less relevant as time has gone on, but you can see they're starting to include just more minifigures too. And then I do really like in this wave we got a lot of cool just random kind of one-off Jedis like the Coleman Trebor, like the
oh,
Colin Trevorrow. Yeah, Colin Trevorrow. Um, no, and then we got the other. I forget what that Jedi's name is, but it's the only time we got him. It's oh gosh,
Mason.
no, not Mace Windu. Um, Stas Ali, who's just a random, just one of the random Jedi that was fighting in the background, right? Because that was kind of the climatic scene of this movie was the big Geonosis arena
Yeah.
fight.
What's interesting too, if you look at this series and you mentioned it, right? Like almost every single set from the 2013 wave has a clone trooper in it,
Mm-hmm.
but minus probably the dual on Geonosis set, which I forgot existed. It looks great.
It looks really cool,
Um,
right? We need more
so
playsets.
every single set, but the dual on Geonosis set has a stormtrooper or clone trooper, but there's only one, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
but this is also the era of Battle Pack, and so it makes sense that there would be, they've diversified. The number of figures in the sets hasn't really changed. What they've done though is they've said like, yo, we know you're just going to get clone troopers and battle packs. So what we're going to do is throw in a bunch of other, more unique characters
Or
that
more
you're not
unique clones, right? Like the
right,
Sergeant clone,
right. That
Pilot
you're not going to be.
clone.
And so instead, you can get them here, and I think that's just like really cool, and I think that's smart. Uh, a smart build process for Lego in terms of how they approach this. This is
Mm-hmm.
also, I think, probably the best Republic gunship in this wave that has ever come out. I
The
got this,
2013 one.
yeah, I got the second one, the Clone Wars one. Um, what I enjoyed about the Clone Wars one were the stickers actually for the side that was like nose art, that I thought was really fun. Um, that was kind of unique and certainly special to the show. But this one was more or less kind of the same build, but compared to the newer one, this one's size is definitely more minifigure friendly. Um, and I guess really what the new one is just the latest Coruscant Guard one, isn't it? Which is
Yeah.
smaller than um, this one still has the bubble turrets in kind of the original and intended form, which I think looks great. And then you had the clone pilot, super battle droids, and then this is one of the only sets where we've ever gotten Padme kind of in this very classic episode 2 outfit, which
Classic is one way to describe it.
was I in 12-year-old me sitting in the movie theater crushing on Natalie Portman in this outfit. Absolutely, she looks great. But it's just a fun inclusion of sort of a random character here that's not commonly included elsewhere, right? So this is the only way that you could ever get her in that kind
In her
of
Geonosis arena attire, yeah.
exactly. And I know there's always been a lot of like rumors and feelings about a Geonosis arena set. I don't really know if we need that, but
I don't know. Look at the duel on Geonosis. What if you had a couple pillars, some stands, and then those kind of 3 different aliens that they fought? I think that would be cool.
that's fair. I don't even think you need stands. I think you just need like maybe
Like
a
the pillar, yeah.
and like maybe just the one that like Obi-Wan Kenobi fought that kind of looked had like
The
the
daddy
horn.
long leg spider thing. Don't add us because we don't know the name of that alien.
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah, little
well,
pincers.
pretty mean.
Yeah.
Like a cross between a daddy long legs and a praying mantis almost.
I'm a piranha. Okay, sorry. I just had to say that. So West, what do you think is missing from episode 2?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I will go back to what I sort of commented earlier, which is I think you could see some like more environmental style builds, right? You could have like a cloning chamber build on Geonosis with a couple of or not Geonosis, but on Camino,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a couple of the Kaminoans, you have some clone troopers, and then maybe you have like some trans clear blue tanks that you could put like a figure in or something. Or maybe
Like in
it's a little,
in the Lego Star Wars the video game, it's like they have like the little pods where like the clones are being like birthed,
yeah.
and then they have just a stud, like a 1x1 square plate inside of it. That would just
Maybe
be
maybe that's a
really
little,
funny.
yeah, maybe it's a little too on the nose right now, but you could have like maybe like a clone training like vignette or
Yeah.
something that I think would be really good with the Kaminoans still, and you throw a couple of clone troopers in there with like some maybe just like a shooting range or something, right? You could do the battle on Geonosis. Um, you could maybe do like a Lars Homestead set. I think it's kind of funny that there's the Anakin and Tusken Raider set, and I think there's probably good reason why Lego hasn't necessarily revisited it. But at the same time, like you could probably redo like Anakin on the desert sloop. And I don't think it's like overly dark for Lego with like they haven't made an Order 66 set with like the kids from the
The
Jedi Temple.
younglings.
So like there's certainly I think some boundaries Lego doesn't necessarily want to cross with Star Wars. I don't know if the Tusken Raiders are enough of humanized enough for like us to feel bad for kind of what happened.
I mean,
But
it is kind of funny that you say that though, because it's called Tusken Raider Encounter, and like there's no defense for what this scene is supposed to depict, because it's not even like they gave him like tents or anything. It's just Anakin on like a swoop bike and Tusken Raiders, and then like one of those moisture evaporator things in the background.
yeah,
Like that's
I mean,
like all you do is just chop up these Tusken Raiders. Like that is the play of the set. It's not even like there's not even you couldn't even argue to be like no, you're supposed to set up a Tusken Raider camp and go on an adventure, and they're out there doing their things. Like no, Anakin's just supposed to come by and just slaughter them. Like that's it.
which and I think going off again on another tangent, I'm great with my tangents today. But like the Mandalorian, if there's any goodness that's come out of that series between that and the Book of Boba Fett, which is making my stomach hurt even saying, I think it's that they did humanize the Tusken Raiders in a way that is interesting and unique to the Star Wars literature, right? Like the Star Wars literature in general, as a whole, has always sort of seen them as like these faceless sand monsters. And now it's like, no, actually they're people with like tribal culture. I think they're human, right? Like it hasn't really been clear that they're not human. They're certainly a humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
So a bipedal human-like creature, if they're not humans. So they're seen as more like indigenous people now with the latest sort of revisions to the Star Wars canon than with some of these newer ones. So I like the way that's going, and so I'm not surprised they haven't revisited that. But your question was, what could they have done? I don't think you could do like a Jedi library scene with Obi-Wan Kenobi. I just don't know what, like a Jedi Temple one. There's the diner, right? Like, there's stuff on Naboo. Like, I mean, what are you just gonna like have Anakin and like Padme like rolling in the grass, like kissing? Like, what's the play feature of like a Naboo, you know, um, like visit to Naboo or something like that? Like,
You know
I
what the play
get
feature is. Do I have to explain the studs and the tiles to you?
no, I'm good. I think the studs and the anti studs.
Yeah. Birds and the beads, studs, anti studs. Do we need to have that conversation now?
That's clear. Um, I think it's just there's again, like I said in the beginning, there's a limited source material here, limited to like what you can really kind of build. So yeah, I don't know. I totally understand why Lego kind of keeps revisiting the stuff that's sold before. Again, to my comment, right? If you look at what has continued to sell, what Lego's continued to produce, I think that's a pretty good indication of what they feel like that is going to sell well,
Mm-hmm.
right? But certainly at this point, there's an argument to be made that if they did a maybe like 20th anniversary sized Slave One in Jango Fett's colors, I bet that would sell really
That would
well.
sell like hotcakes, especially if a Jango Fett was in it, because
Yeah.
he would be. I
What
think
I
they
think
could do a Jedi Temple. I think they could do a like Coruscant chase maybe, and just have like Zam Wessel and Obi-Wan chasing through Coruscant, sort of deal. I think I was kind of, I asked you the question, that I'm sitting here like also trying to think about it,
sure.
and in my mind, you're mentioning there's not a lot of source material, but I'd argue there's the same amount of source material in this movie as there is in, say, Episode 4. The difference, though, is that Episode 4 contains these iconic scenes, right? Of like the scenes themselves are iconic, whereas you're like, well, what about Naboo, or what about, well, if the Naboo had any impact, on the story. I mean, sure, it does have an impact on the story, but if it was an iconic, then you'd be like, so I kept coming back to memes in my mind. Like when you said Naboo, I'm like, yeah, we could have Anakin and Padme being like, for the better, right? And Anakin's just like, looking off to the side. But those are the iconic things that I think of are the memes, and I think that's just because this movie was bad. But there's no trash compact. Like a trash compactor is not a great Lego set, but it's been featured in a ton of Lego sets, right? Like in any Death Star, it's been featured in its own set, and same with like the Death Star trench run. Like it's a trench run. Like is that a great Lego set? No, but it's an iconic scene that's been seen multiple times, right?
I would say then for this movie in particular, a variation on the not duel on Geonosis, but the scene where all of the Jedi show up, right?
Yeah.
I
You
think
mean
that,
Geonosis Arena?
yes. And I know we've talked about that already, but like going away from the animals and getting more into like the battle droid, like that was I think a standout scene for the movies. So that would be what I'd be curious to see how you
Yeah.
could do different variations on. So
Just a kind of
we're
section of the stand, maybe a down pillar, and then you got just shoom, shoom, all the Jedi up there, you know.
I mean, you could find some unique ones that you haven't done before,
Yeah,
right? Or you
totally.
reissue some of the ones you've previously done. Um, I still think you could probably do like a clone command ship in kind of a larger scale,
Yeah.
right? Something more like the size of the speeder that Anakin and Obi-Wan are driving, or they commandeer, more to scale with the actual movie. You mentioned the big kind of cannon, clone cannon vehicle. So I think you could definitely do something like that. And then I did have a comment too about, I wanted to comment on where I think one of the best revisited sets is, which is not this latest Jedi Starfighter, but the previous one with
The
the
hyperdrive. Yeah.
that included Jango Fett in it, right? And arguably the Jango Fett that I would assume everyone would actually be wanting, not
Um,
previous one.
for a minifigure that was from 2017, which was, it's the most recent one we've gotten.
Yeah.
But it's also like $170. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the modern Mandalorian helmet for Lego.
It's more expensive than the 2013 one.
Yeah.
And I think only really the graphic design on it is just a little bit more polished on the new one. I don't think there's anything like
What was the 2013 one?
crazy. It was in the droid snail fighter,
Oh yeah. Okay.
but like nothing is. It's not drastically different
No.
from the 20, but the 2017 ones were 3 times as much.
Yeah. It's just and the ring, right? Like this is where Lego has gotten really good with building sets that are swooshable. And I think you highlighted this too with the 20th anniversary of Slave One
Mm-hmm.
that came out, and you were like, "This is really cool how you can hold it and swoosh it." And some of the new gunships have been doing that really well.
Yeah.
The new ATE has done that really well. So having that way to like hold the hyperdrive ring and move it around is where I think Lego really like it always Lego does a great job of like building on your imagination and making suggestions of things and like allowing kind of creating the conditions that are optimal for you to kind of immerse yourself in play. This is just taking that one step forward and really putting you there because now you can fly the thing around very easily. It looks great. It looks really circular, which is hard to do out of Lego at this scale. Um, Maybe you could argue the frame of that could be better hidden. I'd have to go back to the source material to see how well that kind of matches up. But like, man, I'm surprised they haven't redone that because that looks fantastic. And I believe the Starfighter docked in there pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which again, it's just really cool to see. I'm surprised did they ever do that for episode 3? The hyperdrive rings?
I thought those Jedi Starfighters had hyperdrive built into them. No, or did they? No, they needed hyperdrive rings. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, they didn't. Maybe that's how they would revisit it. Well,
yeah. Anyway,
do you have anything else to add here, or are we bringing this to a wrap?
I think we're pretty much bringing it to a conclusion.
Okay.
I would say in terms of, I guess where, we haven't gone through all of the Lego Star Wars movies and the themes. What do you think about this one compared to episode 1 real quick? Between the two of them, which do you think is more something that you kind of key in on a little bit more or are more excited about, or which one would you prefer if you had to pick one versus the other?
I mean, I think I have to pick this one because I like a lot of the episode 1 stuff, but it's episode 1 boils down to Anakin's pod racer, the Sith infiltrator, and like the Naboo starship, and like we've gotten multiple new Naboo starships, but we haven't gotten multiple new droid fighters. And like this one, like it's got clones in it, and it's got an ATTE, and it like this one actually makes me excited about like building the battle scenes, right? And I kind of talked about that as like what I feel like is a miss in episode 1 because they don't have, you can't really put together a Naboo battle, right? There's no Theed kind of set. There's no, I mean, there's pieces of it and parts of it here and there. And, you certainly could do it. Don't get me wrong. But with this one, like the focus is the excitement of this movie. And I think that the set selection is more diverse here and better overall from a playability standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the series of sets are, I think, just in general, a little more attractive to a larger and wider audience. There's a little bit more to chew on with this series. And then, for Lego and Clone Troopers, that's been a cash cow for them. They could continue. I mean, look at how they've sort of focused on like the 501st stuff now, and I forget what Ahsoka's clones are called, but like
332nd, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
No, that's Obi-Wan. Sorry.
Give me an excuse. Like, make us something a little bit better and different. Go back to Geonosis. Give us the really cool swamp ones from Kashyyyk, right? Like, there's some really cool variations of Clone Trooper out there that we still haven't really dipped our toes into for Lego, but that's just them printing money at this point.
Would
So-
you want to see a Droid Factory set?
Oh, dang it. I was going to mention that. Absolutely. That would be a great one, right? Like, you create, like, kind of an assembly line. It doesn't even, again, right, with Lego, it just needs to be the suggestion.
Mhm.
So you could kind of like a part or a very small vignette there. And one of them could have 3PO's head on it, on the battle. That was a dumb scene, but.
It's a terrible scene.
Oh,
You could just remove that scene from the movie and it's much better. Actually, somebody did that on YouTube. Go look up Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 with no cheese, it's called. And it's like they took out like the mild racism and like the stupid scenes, and like they gave Jar Jar Binks like this like auto-tuned like accent. So he doesn't even speak English. So it's like the character exists, but he's not like Misa, blah, blah, blah. It's like, and you're like, cool, this mumbling is tolerable. It actually is. It actually made me, get past some of my issues with the prequels and enjoy them more.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move over. That kind of wraps up the main topic here. Overall, a lot of potential again with Star Wars here. I feel like, as people talk about Star Wars getting boring in terms of Lego Star Wars because they just keep doing OT stuff, like, let's do another wave. Let's give us another wave of episode 3 or 2. Sorry, I think do an episode 1 wave 1 year and then do an episode 2 wave the next year. Let's do it.
This would be a great time to revisit the dropship and the ATOT.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Oh my gosh! Again, talk about Lego printing money.
Which
Lego.
You just totally reminded me that that's not even on the Brickset database for this. I wonder.
It's a Clone Wars set.
Is it a Clone? It is a Clone Wars set.
Yep.
ATOT. Yeah. Oh, because it's got the. That's right. It has the. Whatever that.
Print.
Thank you. Yeah.
So before we end, let's end this discussion. What is the superior Clone Wars?
What do you mean? The Clone Wars is like the whole thing.
No, I mean the OG Cartoon Network 5-minute long Clone Wars or the Dave Filoni.
I think we should save that debate for. Well, you just described it as Dave Filoni nonsense, so I wonder what you're gonna pick. But in terms of Lego sets, I have to go with the Lego Dave Filoni nonsense because we don't have any Lego sets for the cartoon. But I'm a cartoon truther. Yeah, the Cartoon Network one. Well, I guess they're both Cartoon Network, but yeah, that original 2020 was that 2020? It was 2022, 2023 cartoon was the bomb. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to what are we building? What are we building? All right, West, you're up. What are you building this week?
I finally bought something to build.
Woo!
A Speed Champions Porsche 913 from last year, which was one of their Le Mans prototype cars. I think it's the 913. Don't quote me on it. It's either the 913 or the 963. I think I mentioned that I wanted to get the new BMW Le Mans prototype series with the really overdone M4, but then also the new BMW one. They're just two really great race cars. If you know racing, Le Mans is kind of the peak of endurance racing for the manufacturers, and there's some wonderful race history there. So I'm excited to build it. I have not built it yet, but that is what I intend to build probably next week, and we'll see if I can get something for our next episode. Well, let's see. You share what you're building this week, and then why don't we talk about the next episode before we do Brick Mail? So go ahead.
Well, I built a set that I was actually kind of impressed with. I mean, it's kind of like a boring set, conceptually, but it was a really fun build, and I've kind of been building a lot of these Chinese New Year sets because I got them recently. And I should be moving into my new house in the next 2 weeks. So I'm not trying to build like a ton of sets because that means I just had to move them. But I built the story of, like no intention on mispronunciation here, but of Nian, Nian. My bad. That's the word I'm trying to say. But it's got like this, who I assume is Nian, kind of like a mascot build or puppet build. It's the year of the bowl set from, I believe it was 2021. So there's like a bowl masked minifigure in it, and then it's just kind of got this wall build with some snow on the back, and then it's got a really nice kind of build for some fireworks. So it used one of those like star pieces from like Frozen, or that you've seen in a couple of like the winter sets, but it's in red. And then they've got just different translucent. There's two of them. There's translucent red coming out of it with cones, and then translucent orange coming out of the other one with cones. And then they use wand pieces to give it that explosion. Just a cool set, just a fun set. I like play sets, and this is like the definition of a play set. And
it was the same year as the garden set.
I believe so. Yes.
I think that's technically the year of the ox.
Maybe. I said bowl, didn't I?
That's okay.
Yes.
I had the garden set, loved it. It's still featured in my Lego City as a modular because it was modular, which was awesome. So, yeah. No, great sets.
So you had an announcement about our...
Oh, I just wanted you to share what our next episode was.
So next week, we're going to go more towards a conversation instead of a theme review. And we're going to be talking about our top 5 Lego sets of all time. So it's going to be West personal top 5, and that's going to be my personal top 5. What we'll do, West, I'm telling you this now while we're recording this, come with 6 or 7, so that we don't have the same one, so that we'll have kind of your top 5 and my top 5, and we can say if you stole mine or if I stole yours. But I think it'll be a cool discussion because we'll kind of go through the hits of Lego over time and the history of Lego. It can be a little more personal to us in terms of maybe
is it it's top 5 that we own or top 5?
Whatever you want.
Man, I'm gonna have to think on this.
Yeah, so giving you a week's notice. After that, we'll be talking about Star Wars Episode 3. Wes will be leading that one, and then I'll be taking the May the 4th special. We're just going to talk about the history of Star Wars May the 4th, and kind of the cool promos from it. The state of May the 4th, kind of what it means, etc. Following the Episode 3 podcast for 2 weeks.
For that,
sorry.
We said, will we be in the same location for that one?
Probably
we might be
not.
Oh.
I'll tell you why afterwards.
That's fair.
Okay. All right. So that is what you to expect to come next. So we'll move over to Brick Mail and Brick Mail. We do have some Brick Mail. We have Calvin, our dear friend Calvin W2104, commented on the last week's podcast on YouTube. He said, Hidden Side was doomed as soon as it was released. Box art is too important to do what they did, especially a theme aimed at kids. Not being able to see what you're buying at a quick glance was a horrible move. There's a few good sets within it, but nothing that will be considered a classic at any point.
Mm.
And
so
then,
I disagree a little bit there.
Hold on. He did go on to say 100% thinks that we should get a visitor center from Jurassic Park. So let's go visitor center. But
Calvin, we appreciate the comment, my friend. You're absolutely right. The box art was what killed it. And for anyone who wants to kind of revisit that discussion, that was in our last episode. But if we haven't hit that enough, major foul. So,
but you were saying you think there's some real classics there.
I still think Lego Slenderman is going to be a cult classic. Maybe not classic, but I think I don't know, man. I just think that's so funny.
I know you love those sets. I think part of me. I totally agree with what Calvin, like there's some like surprisingly good sets there, But whenever you have to say, "Oh, it's surprisingly good," it's like
No.
it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean it's amazing. You know, like it's surprisingly good, but that doesn't make it great just because it surprised you at how good it is. So I think there's some surprisingly good sets here. Lego Slender Man is one of them. As somebody who's seen like every scary movie ever, I still didn't even buy any of these sets. I mean, like, whenever my wife and I need to watch a movie, it's like a scary movie of some kind, and like I still didn't even buy these sets. So
yeah, no, that's fair. And yeah. Anyways, do we have more brick mail from?
that was it. So thank you, Calvin, as always, for commenting on the YouTube videos. So if you want to reach the podcast, you can email us or comment, and if you're listening, drop a follow. Give us a review. Super, super appreciated. But that's a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this show. If you would like to reach the show, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at AFOLsWelcome. Instagram is up and running. Let's go. I posted a meme. Go check it out. It's making fun of West and his Hidden Side opinions. So thank you for having an awesome opinion on Hidden Side to give us wonderful memes. But that's all. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Later.